Emma and Ethan Parker were 11 years old when they disappeared on June 17, 2003. That morning had been perfectly ordinary. The twins ate breakfast with their parents in their suburban Chicago home, packed small overnight bags, and climbed into their mother's sedan for the 2-hour drive to their Aunt Vivian's lakeside cottage in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Rebecca Parker kissed her children goodbye at the end of Aunt Vivian's gravel driveway. "Be good, you two. I'll pick you up Sunday afternoon." It was Friday, and this weekend stay with their mother's eccentric sister had become something of a tradition since the twins turned 7. They'd be back in less than 48 hours. "Bye, Mom," the twins called in near-perfect unison, their identical dark curls catching the early summer sunlight. Though fraternal, not identical twins, Emma and Ethan had always possessed an uncanny synchronicity that both delighted and occasionally unnerved those around them. Rebecca watched them race up the path to the cottage where Aunt Vivian waited on the porch, waving enthusiastically. She waved back, pulled out of the driveway, and headed home to enjoy a rare weekend alone with her husband, Daniel. That was the last time she saw her children. The call came Sunday at 2:17 p.m., just as Rebecca was packing the car to pick up the twins. Vivian's voice was high-pitched with panic. "They're gone, Becca. I can't find them anywhere." Rebecca's legs gave way and she sank onto the front step of her house. "What do you mean, gone? What happened?" "We were playing hide-and-seek in the woods behind the cottage," Vivian explained between sobs. "I've been calling for them for hours. I've looked everywhere. I called the neighbors. Have you called the police?" Daniel had appeared in the doorway, alerted by his wife's expression. Yes, they're here now. They want to talk to you." The next hours passed in a blur as Rebecca and Daniel raced to Lake Geneva. By the time they arrived, the search was in full swing. Police officers, neighbors, volunteers with dogs combing the woods surrounding Vivian's property. The local sheriff, a stoic man named Harlan Mills, debriefed them in Vivian's kitchen. "Your sister says the children were last seen around 10 a.m., Mills explained, notepad in hand. "They were playing hide-and-seek in the woods. She was it, and when they didn't return after about 20 minutes, she began actively searching." "That's not like them," Daniel insisted. "They've played in those woods dozens of times. They know the boundaries." Mills nodded sympathetically. "We've got every available officer on this. The dogs haven't picked up a strong scent trail yet, which is concerning, but it rained briefly around noon. That might be complicating things." "They wouldn't just wander off," Rebecca said, her voice hollow with shock. "They're smart kids. They know the rules." Aunt Vivian sat at the kitchen table, her normally vibrant personality diminished by shock and guilt. At 43, she had never married or had children of her own, instead pouring her considerable energy into her career as a botanist and her weekend adventures with her niece and nephew. Now she looked shrunken, aged a decade in hours. "I shouldn't have suggested hide-and-seek," she whispered. "I should have kept them inside." "This isn't your fault, Viv," Daniel said automatically, though his eyes betrayed his struggle not to assign blame. As darkness fell, the search intensified. Floodlights illuminated sections of the woods. Volunteers with flashlights formed human chains, methodically checking every possible hiding place. The lake was dragged, though no one believed the twins, both strong swimmers, would have drowned without a trace. By Monday morning, the FBI had joined the investigation. The case of missing twins from a seemingly secure environment with no witnesses and no obvious explanation fit the criteria for potential abduction. Agent Catherine Reeves, a specialist in child disappearances, arrived from the Milwaukee field office. "We need to consider all possibilities," she told the Parkers gently but firmly, "including that someone may have taken Emma and Ethan." "Who would do that?" Rebecca demanded. "And why them? Why both?" "Twins can be targets for specific types of offenders," Reeves explained, keeping her voice low and clinical to avoid sparking even more panic. "We're checking registered sex offenders in the area, anyone with a history of child abduction, and looking into whether someone might have been watching the cottage." The investigation expanded rapidly. The Parkers' personal lives were examined for any potential enemies or suspicious connections. Vivian's work as a botanist, including her research on rare plant species and connections to environmental groups, was scrutinized for possible links to extremists or blackmail scenarios. The woods were searched again and again, expanding outward in ever-widening circles. Nothing. Not a footprint, not a scrap of clothing, not a single witness who had seen the twins after they entered the woods with their aunt. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. The case remained open, but active leads dwindled. The Parkers participated in press conferences, their faces gaunt with grief and lack of sleep. The twins' photos appeared on milk cartons, billboards, and in post offices across the Midwest. On the one-year anniversary of the disappearance, the local newspaper ran a feature, "The Vanishing Parkers. Where are Emma and Ethan?" The article recounted known facts and explored various theories that had emerged. The twins had been abducted by a passing stranger. They had gotten lost in the woods and succumbed to the elements, their bodies hidden by the dense undergrowth. They had been taken by a child trafficking ring. They had run away, though no one could imagine why. Most disturbing of all, some whispered that Aunt Vivian knew more than she was saying. That theory gained traction when, 18 months after the disappearance, Vivian Mercer sold her lake cottage and moved to Oregon, unable to bear the memories and suspicions that clung to the property. Some viewed her departure as confirmation of guilt. Others recognized it as the action of a broken woman who had lost not only her beloved niece and nephew, but also her relationship with her sister, who could no longer look at Vivian without seeing the moment of carelessness that had cost them everything. The Parkers' marriage didn't survive the strain. 3 years after the twins vanished, Rebecca and Daniel divorced. Daniel moved to Seattle, remarried, and had another child. Rebecca remained in Chicago, working as an elementary school teacher, living in the same house, keeping the twins' rooms exactly as they had left them, convinced that someday they would return. Law enforcement officially classified the case as cold after 5 years, though it was periodically reviewed by new investigators, hoping to find something their predecessors had missed. Occasional tips came in. A waitress in Florida thought she'd served the children, now teenagers. A man in Canada believed he'd spotted them at a mall, but none panned out. 10 years passed. Emma and Ethan would have been 21, perhaps in college, starting careers, falling in love. Rebecca marked the milestone by establishing a scholarship fund in their names at the local high school they would have attended. Daniel flew in for the ceremony, the first time they had seen each other in years. "Do you ever wonder if they're still alive?" he asked as they shared a coffee afterward. "Every day," Rebecca replied, studying the new lines in her ex-husband's face. "I feel like I would know if they weren't. A mother would know." Daniel nodded, though his expression suggested doubt. "Catherine Reeves called me last week. She's retiring from the FBI. Says our case still haunts her." "They all gave up," Rebecca said bitterly. Even Vivian. They hadn't spoken of Vivian in years. Last they'd heard, she was living in Portland, working for an environmental nonprofit. She still sent Christmas cards, which Rebecca left unopened. Vivian had reached out repeatedly in the early years, desperate to maintain connection and share in the grief, but Rebecca's anger had formed an impenetrable wall. "She didn't give up," Daniel said quietly. "She just couldn't bear it anymore. None of us could." 20 years passed in total. Emma and Ethan Parker became a footnote in criminal history, mentioned in articles about unsolved disappearances, occasionally featured on true crime podcasts where amateur sleuths dissected the sparse evidence and offered increasingly far-fetched theories. Rebecca Parker, now 61, still lived in the Chicago house. She had retired from teaching, devoting her time to child safety advocacy. She had aged gracefully but carried profound sadness in her eyes, visible even when she smiled, which was rarely. Then, on June 17, 2023, exactly 20 years after the twins disappeared, everything changed. Rebecca opened her laptop that morning to find an email from an address she didn't recognize, truthseeker2023email.com. The subject line made her heart stop. "Emma and Ethan, watch this." Her finger hovered over the delete key, assuming it was a cruel prank. Over the years, she had received dozens of such messages from disturbed individuals or thrill seekers, but something made her open it. The email contained only a link to a video file stored in an anonymous cloud server. No text, no explanation. For a long moment, she stared at the link, her mind racing through the possibilities, most of them horrific. She had worked with enough victim families to know that predators sometimes sent footage of their crimes to torment survivors. But she had to know. She clicked the link. The video was time-stamped June 18, 2003, the day after the twins disappeared. The footage was grainy but clear enough, shot from what appeared to be a handheld camera. It showed Emma and Ethan, unmistakably her children, sitting in the back seat of a car. They looked confused but not terrified, occasionally glancing at the camera with uncertain expressions. "Say hi to the camera," came a woman's voice from behind the lens. The voice was disguised somehow, mechanically altered to be unrecognizable. "Hi," the twins murmured in unison, their voices small. "Tell us your names." "Emma Parker." "Ethan Parker." "And how old are you?" 11, they answered together. The camera panned briefly to a car window, showing a highway sign for Interstate 90 West. Then it cut to black. Rebecca stared at the frozen final frame, her hands shaking so badly she could barely reach for her phone. 20 years of uncertainty had just been replaced with horrifying confirmation. Someone had taken her children, driven them away from Lake Geneva, and now, for some unfathomable reason, wanted her to know it. She called Daniel first, then the FBI. By nightfall, the investigation that had gone cold 2 decades earlier was suddenly, violently active again. The email and video had awakened the case from its long slumber. But no one could have predicted the twisted path it would take, or the shocking truth that would finally emerge about what really happened to the Parker twins on that summer day in 2003. Special Agent Marcus Donovan, 38 and 15 years into his FBI career, had never seen anything quite like it. 20 years after 2 children vanished without a trace, a video surfaces showing them alive, hours after their disappearance. No ransom demand, no confession, no explanation. Just 43 seconds of footage that confirmed what had been suspected but never proven. Emma and Ethan Parker had been abducted. "The video is authentic," he told Rebecca Parker, who sat rigidly in a chair at the Chicago FBI field office the day after receiving the mysterious email. Daniel Parker had flown in overnight from Seattle and sat beside his ex-wife, their first reunion in years. "We've had our technical team analyze it thoroughly," Donovan continued. "It hasn't been digitally manipulated. The timestamp is consistent with the file's metadata. Those are your children, filmed on June 18, 2003. "Why now?" Daniel asked the question that hung heavy in the air. "Why would someone send this after 20 years? "That's what we need to figure out," Donovan replied. He'd studied the case extensively overnight, familiarizing himself with the investigation that had consumed his predecessors. The email was sent through an anonymizing service. The video was uploaded to a server that doesn't keep IP logs. Whoever sent this knew how to cover their tracks. Rebecca had barely spoken since arriving at the office, her eyes fixed on the still image from the video displayed on Donovan's computer screen. Her children, frozen in time, eternally 11 years old. "I want to know if they're alive," she finally said, her voice surprisingly steady. "That's all that matters now." Donovan chose his words carefully. "Mrs. Parker, I have to be honest with you. This video confirms they were alive the day after they disappeared, but it doesn't tell us anything about what happened afterward. We have to prepare for all possibilities." "I've been preparing for 20 years, Rebecca replied. "I want answers, not more gentle warnings about keeping my expectations realistic." Daniel placed his hand over his ex-wife's, the first physical contact they'd had in years. She didn't pull away. "We're reopening the case completely," Donovan assured them. "This video is the first real lead in decades. We'll re-interview everyone involved in the original investigation, and we're analyzing every frame of this footage for clues about location, the vehicle, anything that might help identify the kidnapper." The investigation moved quickly. The highway sign briefly visible in the video had been identified as one near the Wisconsin-Minnesota border, suggesting the abductor had been taking the twins west. The car itself, based on the limited interior views, was tentatively identified as a 1990s model Chevrolet Suburban, dark blue or black. Former Sheriff Harlan Mills, now retired in 72, was interviewed at his home outside Lake Geneva. "I always suspected abduction," he told Donovan. But we never found a single witness who saw any suspicious vehicles or strangers in the area that weekend. What about Vivian Mercer? Donovan asked. The children's aunt. She was the last person to see them. Mills shook his head. We looked hard at her. Had to. But she passed multiple polygraphs, had no history of instability, and genuinely loved those kids. Her story never changed. They were playing hide and seek and they vanished. She was devastated. I'd like to speak with her. Last I heard, she was still in Oregon. Haven't had contact in years. Locating Vivian Mercer proved surprisingly difficult. She had left the environmental nonprofit in Portland 5 years earlier, and subsequently seemed to have deliberately minimized her digital footprint. No social media accounts, no property records, no recent employment easily traceable through databases. It took 3 days of dedicated searching before they found her, living under her married name, Vivian Carson, in a small town near Bend, Oregon. Agent Donovan flew to Oregon himself, recognizing the delicacy of the situation. Before approaching Vivian, however, he made a stop at the local sheriff's office. I need everything you have on a resident named Vivian Carson, formerly Vivian Mercer, he explained to Sheriff Kate Lundgren, showing his credentials. Lundgren, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, raised an eyebrow. Vivian, she's one of our most respected residents, runs the community garden program, volunteers at the library. What's the FBI want with her? I'm reopening a cold case from 20 years ago in which she was involved. Her niece and nephew disappeared while in her care. Recognition dawned in Lundgren's eyes. The Parker twins. I remember that case from when I was a deputy in Idaho. No one ever figured out what happened to them. We have new evidence. I need to speak with her. She's not going to run, Lundgren said. I can call her in if you'd prefer a neutral location. Donovan considered this. No, I'd rather see her in her home environment. Observe her natural reactions. Vivian Carson lived in a modest craftsman-style house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by an immaculately maintained native plant garden. At 63, she had aged well, her once dark hair now silver but still thick, her posture straight. But when she opened the door to find an FBI agent on her porch, the color drained from her face. They found them, she whispered. Not a question, a statement. May I come in, Mrs. Carson? Donovan asked. She led him to a sunlit kitchen that smelled of fresh bread. On one wall hung a collection of framed photographs, including, Donovan noted with interest, several of Emma and Ethan Parker, their school photos frozen at age 11. You still keep their pictures up, he observed. Vivian's hands trembled slightly as she poured tea. Every day for 20 years I've looked at their faces and said good morning. I've never stopped thinking about them. She set the cups down and faced him directly. Please, just tell me, are they dead? Have their bodies been found? I don't have that information, Donovan replied. What we have is new evidence that they were abducted. A video showing them alive the day after they disappeared has surfaced. Vivian collapsed into a chair, her hand over her mouth. A video of Emma and Ethan. Who sent it? Where were they? Were they hurt? They appeared physically unharmed in the footage. They were in a vehicle, possibly a Chevrolet Suburban, heading west on I-90. Donovan watched her reactions carefully. The video was sent anonymously to their mother. We don't know who sent it or why after all this time. Rebecca received it? Vivian's eyes filled with tears. How is she? As well as can be expected. Donovan pulled out his tablet and queued up the video. I'd like you to watch this, Mrs. Carson. Tell me if you recognize anything. The voice, the vehicle, any detail that might help us. Vivian watched the brief clip 3 times, her tears flowing freely. That's them, my beautiful kids. They look confused but not terrified. She shook her head. I don't recognize the voice or anything about the vehicle. It's been altered, the voice. Mrs. Carson, I need to ask a difficult question. In 20 years, have you ever received any communication about Emma and Ethan? Any hints about what might have happened to them? Nothing, she said firmly. If I had, don't you think I would have come forward? Those children were everything to me. You moved away quite suddenly after their disappearance. Her face hardened. Because my own sister believed I had something to do with it. Because neighbors I'd known for years stopped making eye contact. Because I couldn't walk into that house without seeing ghosts. She took a deep breath. Agent Donovan, I have lived with this guilt for 2 decades. Not guilt from harming those children, I would never, but guilt for failing to protect them. If you're here to accuse me again, get on with it. I've heard it all before. Donovan studied her for a long moment. I don't think you took those children, Mrs. Carson, but I do think you might know something important that you haven't realized is important, something that could help us find out who did. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Rebecca Parker had become fixated on the email that had delivered the video. She had examined every aspect of it, searching for hidden meanings in the anonymous sender's address, Truthseeker 2023. The name suggests someone who knows the truth and wants to reveal it, she told Daniel over dinner at her house. They had fallen into an uneasy collaboration, their shared mission temporarily bridging the years of separation. And 2023, this year, they created this account specifically to send the video now. But why wait 20 years? Daniel asked, pushing food around his plate without eating. If this person knew what happened to our children, why not come forward sooner? Maybe they were involved. Maybe they were protecting someone. Maybe they've been gathering courage. Rebecca looked up suddenly. Or maybe they were a child themselves when it happened. The theory electrified the investigation. If the sender had been a child in 2003, they would now be an adult, possibly with a clearer understanding of events they had witnessed, or information they had been told to keep secret. Someone who had carried this knowledge through childhood into adulthood and finally decided to come forward. Agent Donovan returned from Oregon with a new perspective on Vivian Carson. She's mourning those children as deeply as their parents, he reported to his team. I don't believe she was involved in their disappearance, but there's something else interesting. She's been receiving anonymous letters for years. The letters had started arriving about 5 years after the twins disappeared. Plain white envelopes with no return address, containing a single sheet of paper with messages like, "They're safe," or "Don't worry about them." Vivian had reported them to local police initially, but when forensic examination revealed nothing useful, the letters were dismissed as cruel pranks not uncommon in high-profile missing persons cases. But here's the thing, Donovan continued. She kept every letter, 15 in total, arriving roughly once a year. And the handwriting appears to be from 2 different people, similar but distinct, as if written by related individuals. The implication hung in the air. Could Emma and Ethan themselves have been sending these messages to their aunt? Forensic analysis of the letters began immediately. The paper was common office stock, available at any store. The postmarks changed over the years: Idaho, Montana, Washington, Oregon, California, suggesting movement throughout the western United States. No fingerprints, no DNA, no identifying marks beyond the handwriting itself. Rebecca insisted on seeing the letters, traveling to Oregon for the first face-to-face meeting with her sister in 20 years. The reunion was stilted, years of blame and grief creating an almost visible barrier between them. You should have told me about these, Rebecca said, carefully examining each letter through its protective sleeve. I tried, in the beginning, Vivian replied. You wouldn't take my calls. Then the police said they were probably hoaxes and She trailed off. I started to believe they might really be from Emma and Ethan. I needed to believe they were alive. Why would they contact you and not me? The old accusation lingered beneath the question. Vivian flinched but answered steadily. Maybe because they knew I would want to believe it was them. Maybe because they knew you would immediately involve the authorities. Or maybe it's not them at all. Maybe it's their abductor, tormenting me because they know I blame myself. The breakthrough came not from the letters, but from the video itself. Advanced analysis of the brief glimpse out the car window revealed not just the highway sign, but a reflection in the glass. A partial image of the driver. Enhancement could only recover limited detail, but it was enough to determine the driver was a woman with long, dark hair. Then came the second email. 5 days after the first video arrived, Rebecca received another message from the same anonymous address. This one contained a different video clip, longer, nearly 2 minutes, and time-stamped 1 week after the twins' disappearance. The footage showed Emma and Ethan sitting at a kitchen table in an unfamiliar house. They were eating sandwiches, looking tired but not visibly injured or distressed. The camera angle suggested it had been placed on a counter or shelf, recording surreptitiously. A woman's voice, disguised as in the first video, spoke from off-camera. "Are you both okay? Do you need anything else?" Emma looked up. "When can we go home?" "I told you, sweetheart. This is your home now. You're safe here." Ethan frowned. "But what about Mom and Dad? They must be really worried." "They know you're safe," the woman replied. "This is for the best. You'll understand when you're older." The video cut to black, then continued with a different scene. The twins sitting on a porch swing looking out at pine trees and mountains. A date stamp indicated this was 2 weeks after their disappearance. "Do you like it here?" the woman's voice asked. "It's pretty," Emma acknowledged. "But I miss my friends and Aunt Vivian." At the mention of their aunt, the camera shook slightly, as if the person holding it had reacted emotionally. The video ended there, but a text message appeared on screen afterward. "They were never harmed. They were loved. They were protected. I will reveal more when I know it's safe." This second video transformed the investigation entirely. The glimpse of the landscape, the architectural style of the house, experts quickly identified it as likely somewhere in western Montana or northern Idaho. The reference to the twins being protected suggested the abductor believed they were rescuing the children from some threat. Most significantly, the twins' behavior indicated they were not being brutalized or terrorized. Confused and homesick, yes, but not displaying the extreme trauma expected in violent abduction cases. This wasn't a sexual predator or random kidnapping, Donovan told the Parkers and Vivian, who had now joined forces in Chicago. This was someone who knew your family, who felt they had a reason to take the children, and who wanted to care for them long term. "But who?" Daniel demanded. "Who would think our children needed protecting from us?" Rebecca had gone very still, a distant memory surfacing. "There was someone," she said slowly. "Someone who believed we were harming the twins. My mother's sister, Judith. My aunt." "I remember Judith," Vivian interjected. "She had some kind of breakdown when Mom died. Made accusations about our father that didn't make sense. She'd been estranged from the family for years before the twins were born." Rebecca nodded. "She showed up once when the twins were about 5. Came to the house unannounced. Said she'd been receiving messages that the children were in danger from their grandfather's influence. I thought she was having another mental health crisis and asked her to leave. She sent letters afterward, rambling about family curses and generational trauma. We never connected her to the disappearance because she'd never met Vivian as an adult," Daniel explained. "She didn't even know about the Lake Geneva cottage. How could she have known the twins would be there that weekend? Unless she'd been watching," Donovan said, "following the family, monitoring movements." A new search began for Judith Wheeler, 68 years old, who had disappeared from records around the same time as her great-niece and nephew vanished. No driver's license renewals, no social security activity, no property records, as if she too had simply evaporated. But now they had a theory, a suspect, and a rough geographic location. The investigation that had stalled for 20 years suddenly had momentum, and somewhere the anonymous sender, possibly one of the twins themselves, was watching, releasing information methodically, seemingly testing whether it was finally safe to reveal the full truth. The third email arrived exactly 1 week after the second, and with it, the case broke wide open. The third video was different from the previous 2. Instead of footage of the twins, it was a single continuous shot of a woman speaking directly to the camera. Her face was digitally blurred and her voice was disguised, but her message was clear and deliberate. "My name is not important," she began. "What matters is that I've protected Emma and Ethan Parker since June 17, 2003. I took them because I had to. They were in danger, not from their parents who were blind to the threat, but from what had been planned for them." Rebecca, Daniel, Vivian, and Agent Donovan watched in stunned silence as the woman continued. "The danger came from a group that identified the twins as special. They have abilities, subtle ones that manifested early. They can sense things others can't. They know things they shouldn't be able to know. The group had been watching them since they were toddlers, waiting until they turned 12 to take them for their program." "What the hell is she talking about?" Daniel whispered. The weekend at Vivian's cottage was when they planned to act. The blurred figure continued. I intervened first. I've kept them safe, moving frequently, homeschooling them, teaching them to protect themselves and control their abilities. They've grown into remarkable adults. And now, they've decided it's time for the truth to come out. The woman leaned closer to the camera. Emma and Ethan want to meet their parents. But first, you need to understand what you're dealing with. The group still exists. They still collect special children. If you involve too many authorities, you'll attract their attention again. Agent Donovan can continue to lead the investigation, but keep it contained. She provided specific instructions for a meeting to be held in 3 days at a remote location in Glacier National Park, Montana. Only Rebecca, Daniel, Vivian, and Donovan were to attend. No other law enforcement, no surveillance. If we detect any deviation from these instructions, we'll disappear again, the woman warned. And this time it will be forever. The video ended with a brief clip of 2 young adults, a man and woman around 31 years old, standing side by side against a natural backdrop of mountains. Though their features had matured, they were unmistakably Emma and Ethan Parker, alive and well 2 decades after their disappearance. This is insane, Donovan said when the video finished. She's talking about some kind of psychic abilities, a mysterious group hunting children. This sounds like paranoid delusion. But the twins are alive, Rebecca said, her voice breaking as she stared at the final frame. My children are alive. We can't possibly agree to these terms, Donovan argued. Meeting at a remote location with minimal backup? It could be a trap. Or it could be our only chance to see our children again, Daniel countered. Look at them. They're adults now. If they were being held against their will, wouldn't they have escaped by now? This woman, whoever she is, genuinely believes she rescued them. Vivian had been quietly processing the video. The abilities she mentioned. The twins did have unusual moments when they were young. They would sometimes finish each other's sentences, know who was calling before the phone rang, find lost objects by seemingly knowing where to look. Many twins have heightened connection, Donovan pointed out. And children often seem intuitive because they notice details adults miss. Yes, but their pediatrician once mentioned to me that he'd never seen twins with such synchronized brain activity. Their EEG patterns during a research study were nearly identical, even when they were in separate rooms. Vivian looked at her sister. Remember when they both got that terrible flu on the same day, with exactly the same symptoms, even though Ethan was at a sleepover 20 miles away? Rebecca nodded slowly. And that time they both woke up screaming from the same nightmare, describing the same details when they were sleeping in different bedrooms. You can't seriously be suggesting your children have supernatural powers, Donovan said incredulously. Not supernatural, Daniel said thoughtfully. Maybe just different neurological wiring, enhanced intuition. It doesn't matter if we believe it. What matters is that someone else believed it strongly enough to take them. And now they want to meet. The debate continued for hours. Donovan insisted on running the video through every analytical tool available, trying to identify the speaker or location. He wanted a full tactical team in place at the meeting site, protocols for every contingency. Rebecca and Daniel wanted to follow the instructions precisely, terrified of losing this chance to reunite with their children. Eventually, they reached a compromise. Donovan would be the only official FBI presence at the meeting, but he would have a small team stationed within radio range, ready to move in if necessary. Thermal imaging drones would scan the area beforehand to identify any potential threats or ambushes. Rebecca, Daniel, and Vivian would wear nearly undetectable tracking devices. The 4-hour drive to Glacier National Park was tense. Rebecca stared out the window at the spectacular Montana landscape, trying to imagine her children growing up amidst such wild beauty. Had they been happy? Had they missed her as desperately as she'd missed them? Would they forgive her for not finding them sooner? The meeting location was a viewpoint overlooking a pristine alpine lake, accessible only by a mile-long hiking trail. They arrived 2 hours early, allowing Donovan's team to secure the area before withdrawing to their predetermined positions. Remember, Donovan cautioned as they waited, we don't know who this woman is or what her mental state might be. Let me take the lead if there's any sign of danger. At precisely the appointed time, Two figures emerged from the tree line across the small clearing. Emma and Ethan Parker, no longer children but fully grown adults, approached slowly. They wore hiking clothes and carried small backpacks, looking like any other 30-something outdoor enthusiasts enjoying the national park. Behind them came a third figure, a woman in her 60s with long silver hair pulled back in a braid. Though her face had aged, Rebecca recognized her immediately. "Aunt Judith," she whispered. The twins stopped about 20 feet away, studying their parents and aunt with expressions mixing caution and emotion. They looked healthy, fit, and alert, not at all like victims of 2 decades of captivity. "Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad," Emma said, her voice steady but thick with emotion. "It's been a long time." Rebecca took an instinctive step forward, but Donovan placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Let them come to you," he murmured. "We know you have questions," Ethan said. His voice had deepened into a man's, but there was still something of the 11-year-old boy in his mannerisms. "We have them too. That's why we're here, to finally get answers for all of us." "Where have you been?" Daniel asked, his voice cracking. "Why didn't you contact us before now?" "We couldn't," Emma replied. "We weren't sure it was safe, for us or for you." "I know you see me as a kidnapper," she said, addressing Rebecca directly. "But I saved them. The organization was going to take them that weekend. They had people in place around Vivian's cottage. I got there first." "What organization?" Donovan demanded. "Who are these people supposedly hunting children?" "They call themselves the Novus Institute," Judith replied. "Officially, they're a private research foundation studying cognitive development. Unofficially, they identify children with heightened abilities and acquire them through various means, sometimes legal adoption of orphans, sometimes orchestrated accidents that eliminate parents, sometimes direct abduction." "That's absurd," Donovan said. "A conspiracy that extensive would have been exposed." Emma and Ethan exchanged glances, demonstrating that silent communication that had always connected them. "Show them," Ethan said quietly. Emma nodded and reached into her backpack, removing a tablet. She approached cautiously and handed it to her mother. "This contains documents from the Novus Institute, internal memos, selection criteria for candidates, tracking reports on dozens of children, including us. There are photos of their facilities, testimony from others who escaped the program, and evidence of their connections to influential people who protect them." Rebecca took the tablet with trembling hands, Daniel and Vivian crowding close to see the screen. The documents appeared authentic, detailed psychological evaluations of the twins from ages 3 through 11, surveillance photos taken at their school and home, and specific plans for acquisition scheduled for June 17, 2003. "How did you get these?" Donovan asked, professional skepticism warring with the evidence before him. "I worked for them," Judith said simply, "as a data analyst. I didn't know what the research was really for at first. When I figured it out, I tried to report it, but discovered how deep their protection went. So I started warning families instead. Most thought I was crazy." She looked at Rebecca with profound sadness. "Including you. You never showed me evidence like this," Rebecca said defensively. "You talked about family curses and spiritual energy. Because I was being watched, I couldn't be explicit. I tried to warn you in ways they wouldn't detect." The twins had moved closer during this exchange, now standing just a few feet from their parents. Ethan spoke directly to Donovan. "We're not here to convince you of a vast conspiracy. We just want a chance to reconnect with our family without putting anyone at risk. The evidence is there if you choose to investigate it." "Why contact us now, after 20 years?" Daniel asked, his eyes never leaving his children's faces, drinking in every detail. "Because the Novus Institute is finally vulnerable," Emma explained. "Their funding has been cut after failed experiments. Their political protection is eroding. And because we're adults now, able to protect ourselves in ways we couldn't as children. And because we missed you," Ethan added simply. "We've made a good life, but there's been a hole in it shaped like you three." He glanced at Vivian, including her in this statement. The emotional dam broke. Rebecca stepped forward, arms outstretched. After a moment's hesitation, Emma moved into her mother's embrace. Ethan joined seconds later, and Daniel wrapped his arms around all of them. Vivian stood apart until Emma reached out and pulled her into the circle. Judith and Donovan remained where they were, watching this reunion from opposite perspectives, one with satisfaction, the other with lingering suspicion. "I have the coordinates for a safe house," Judith said quietly to Donovan. "A place where we can talk properly, away from potential surveillance. You can bring your backup team if it makes you feel better, but leave the electronics behind. They have ways of tracking digital footprints." As the emotional reunion continued, Emma suddenly stiffened and looked at her brother. Something unspoken passed between them. "We need to move," she announced. "Now, someone's coming." "How do you know?" Donovan asked, instantly alert. Ethan pointed to a hawk circling overhead. "That's not a hawk. The wing movements are wrong. It's a drone disguised as a bird. Novus technology. They're still monitoring us." The safe house was a rustic cabin tucked into a remote valley 30 miles from the meeting point. With Donovan's team providing security perimeter, the reunited family gathered around a large wooden table. 20 years of separation compressed into urgent conversation. "We need to understand everything from the beginning," Rebecca said, her eyes constantly moving between her now adult children, as if afraid they might disappear again. "Who is this Novus Institute? Why did they target my children? And Judith, why didn't you just come to us directly with proof instead of taking them?" Judith's weathered face showed both determination and regret. The Novus Institute was founded in the 1970s by Dr. Walter Erickson, a neurologist studying cognitive anomalies. He discovered that certain children display abilities that most would call heightened intuition, but actually represent a different form of processing information, sensing patterns others miss, picking up electromagnetic frequencies the average brain filters out, forming neural connections across distances when emotionally bonded. "Like twins who can sense each other's pain or thoughts," Vivian suggested. "Exactly, but the abilities can manifest in any child with the right neurological structure. Twins are more common targets because the shared developmental environment increases the likelihood of these traits emerging." Judith pulled out a battered folder. At first, Erickson's research was legitimate academic work. Then private interests got involved. Military applications, intelligence agencies, corporations seeking predictive capabilities for markets. "You expect us to believe a secret program has been kidnapping psychic children for decades?" Donovan's skepticism remained palpable. "Not psychic," Emma corrected firmly. "That implies supernatural abilities. This is neurological, Agent Donovan. Our brains process certain types of information differently. We perceive patterns in data streams that others miss. We register subtle environmental changes that most people filter out. And yes, Ethan and I have an unusually strong neural connection that allows us to communicate non-verbally. We can't read minds or move objects with our thoughts," Ethan added with a wry smile. "We're not X-Men. We're just differently wired. The Institute identifies children with these traits and acquires them for their program," Judith continued. "The children are raised in controlled environments, their abilities developed and enhanced through various methods. Some are eventually placed in strategic positions, finance, intelligence, scientific research, where their capabilities serve the Institute's clients." "And you worked for these people?" Daniel asked, his arms still protectively around Ethan's shoulders. "As a data analyst, yes. I processed test results without understanding their context until I was accidentally copied on an internal memo about acquisition procedures. So once I realized what was happening, I tried to alert authorities but discovered the Institute's protection extended into federal agencies, including branches of the FBI. Donovan bristled. "That's a serious accusation. Which is why I have names, dates, and documentation." Judith nodded toward the tablet Emma had provided. "Not everyone in these agencies is complicit. Most have no idea. But enough key positions are compromised to make official channels dangerous. So you went rogue and started kidnapping children yourself." Rebecca couldn't keep the accusation from her voice. "The twins are the only children I ever took," Judith said quietly. "Others I managed to warn in time for families to relocate, change identities. But with Emma and Ethan," she looked at her great-niece and nephew with profound sadness. "I tried warning you, Rebecca. You thought I was having another breakdown." Emma interjected gently. Mom, the weekend we disappeared, did anything unusual happen before we left for Aunt Vivian's? Rebecca frowned, thinking back. Like what? Unexpected visitors? New people showing interest in us? Changes in routine? A memory surfaced, something she hadn't considered significant at the time. There was a new school counselor who specifically requested to meet with you both, said it was a district-wide program for high-achieving students. She asked a lot of questions about your developmental milestones, your social connections, your dreams. Classic Novus assessment protocol, Ethan said grimly. They were in final evaluation phase. Vivian had been quietly processing everything. The hide-and-seek game, she said suddenly. I suggested it that morning, but I don't know why. It wasn't something we normally played. Judith nodded. Subtle suggestion techniques. They likely used environmental cues to guide your decisions, making the idea of a forest game seem appealing at exactly the right moment. Are you saying I was manipulated into putting the children in danger? Vivian's voice shook with distress. We were all manipulated, Judith replied. The Institute had been observing the family for years, looking for the perfect opportunity. The cottage provided ideal isolation. Their team was in position that weekend to create a tragic accident, where the twins would be presumed drowned in the lake after wandering away from a game. She turned to Donovan. They wouldn't have left evidence. They never do. So you took them first, Daniel said, piecing it together. How? I'd been monitoring the Institute's communications about the twins. When I learned about the planned acquisition, I drove to Lake Geneva and watched the cottage. When the hide-and-seek game began, I intercepted Emma and Ethan in the woods before the Institute's team could reach them. Emma picked up the narrative. She told us we were in danger and needed to come with her immediately. We'd both been having nightmares about water and darkness for weeks. Precognitive anxiety, we later realized. Something about Aunt Judith felt trustworthy, so we went. We drove west, changing vehicles several times, Ethan continued. Judith had prepared identities, funds, a network of safe locations. She homeschooled us, trained us to be vigilant, taught us to understand and control our abilities. And you never questioned her story? Rebecca asked. Never tried to contact us? The twins exchanged glances, that silent communication flowing between them. We did, at first, Emma admitted. But within weeks, Judith showed us surveillance photos of men watching our house, questioning our friends. When we were 14, we actually saw Novus operatives at a distance. They never stopped looking for us. We considered contacting you many times over the years, Ethan added, but we couldn't risk leading them to us, or putting you in danger. The safest path for everyone was to stay hidden. Until now, Donovan interjected. What's changed? 3 things, Emma replied. First, we've identified key vulnerabilities in the Institute's structure. Second, our abilities have fully matured. We can sense surveillance and danger in ways we couldn't as children. And third, she reached for her mother's hand. We couldn't bear the separation any longer. We needed to find a way back to you. As night fell over the remote cabin, Agent Donovan excused himself to check in with his team, deliberately giving the family privacy for deeper conversation. Outside under the Montana stars, he contacted his superior, carefully omitting specific details about the twins' location. The situation is complicated, he explained. The abductor believes she was protecting the children from an organization called the Novus Institute. The twins, now adults, corroborate her story and have provided documentation that appears legitimate. Inside, the family conversation had turned to more personal matters. 20 years of missed milestones, of growth and change experienced separately. We graduated high school through an accredited homeschool program, Emma explained. I studied data science online through a European university that didn't require physical attendance. Ethan specialized in environmental biology. We've worked remotely, moved frequently. Where have you lived all these years? Daniel asked. Everywhere and nowhere, Ethan replied with a sad smile. Montana, Idaho, Oregon, Northern California, Alaska for a while. Never more than 18 months in one place. Always rural, always under different names. What about friends, relationships? Rebecca couldn't help asking, thinking of all the normal experiences her children had missed. The twins exchanged another look. Limited, Emma acknowledged. We had careful connections in each community, but always knew we'd be leaving. Romance was complicated by our situation, but we weren't unhappy, Ethan added quickly. We had purpose, meaningful work, safety, and we had each other. When Donovan returned, the family presented him with their proposal, a coordinated effort to compile and verify all evidence against the Novus Institute, identify compromised officials who had protected it, and present the case to multiple oversight agencies simultaneously, making a cover-up impossible. This is beyond my authority, Donovan warned, and frankly, beyond my ability to assess. I need to consult specialists who can verify these claims. Carefully selected specialists, Emma emphasized. The Institute has people in every relevant agency. One wrong contact and they'll know we've surfaced. I understand your caution, but I can't launch an investigation of this magnitude based solely on your word. Ethan considered this, then made an unexpected offer. Would a demonstration help? Would seeing our abilities firsthand make our claims more credible? Donovan raised an eyebrow. What kind of demonstration? Information processing, Emma suggested. Ethan and I can analyze patterns in ways that conventional methods miss. Give us a cold case, something with substantial data, but no resolution. After consideration, Donovan retrieved a file from his vehicle, a 5-year-old serial murder case that had gone cold despite extensive evidence. The Springfield Strangler. 4 victims, thousands of data points, no viable suspect. The twins spread the case materials across the table and began a process that left the others watching in astonishment. They barely spoke aloud, occasionally murmuring half-sentences that the other would complete. Their hands moved in sync over photographs, reports, and timelines. Twice they closed their eyes simultaneously, seeming to fall into a trance-like state before snapping back to awareness. After 40 minutes, they looked up. Your killer is Arnold Jeffries, a delivery driver for a medical supply company, Emma stated confidently. The connection between victims isn't geographic or demographic as you believed, but medical. All 4 received home deliveries of prescription supplies. The evidence is in the delivery logs, Ethan continued. Jeffries altered them after each murder, but the digital timestamps on the system backups don't match the printed versions in your file. He also collected trophies, small items mentioned as missing in 3 of the 4 victim reports but never connected. Those items are in a storage unit registered to his deceased mother's name in Carbondale, Emma finished. Unit 227. The code pattern is her birth date. Donovan stared at them in disbelief. That's impossible. We had 30 agents on this case for months. We don't see more information than you have, Ethan explained. We just process it differently. Patterns emerge for us that others miss. If what they're saying checks out, Daniel said quietly, imagine what an organization could do with dozens of people with these abilities under their control. The implications hung heavy in the air. If the twins were telling the truth, and Donovan was beginning to believe they were, then the Novus Institute represented a threat far beyond a simple kidnapping case. I need to verify this lead on Jeffries, Donovan said, rising from the table. If it's accurate, he didn't finish the sentence, but his expression had shifted from skepticism to cautious belief. As he stepped outside to make a secure call, the twins turned to their parents and aunt. We have one more truth to share, Emma said solemnly. Something we've never told anyone, not even Judith. What is it? Rebecca asked, her mother's intuition sensing the weight of the confession to come. The reason the Novus Institute wanted us specifically, Ethan began. It's not just about our cognitive abilities. It's about what we can do together that no one else can. Emma took a deep breath. We can see possible futures. The silence that followed Emma's revelation was broken only by the soft crackling of the cabin's wood stove. Rebecca and Daniel exchanged bewildered glances, while Vivian leaned forward with intense focus. Judith showed no surprise, merely quiet acceptance, as if a suspicion had been confirmed. What do you mean, see possible futures? Daniel finally asked. It's not like crystal ball predictions, Ethan clarified quickly. We don't see specific events clearly. It's more like probability mapping. When we connect deeply, we perceive patterns extending forward in time, potential outcomes based on current variables. Like advanced predictive modeling, but organic instead of computational, Emma added. We see branching pathways, shifting as decisions are made. Most paths blur into statistical noise, but occasionally, a high probability outcome appears with striking clarity. That's why the Institute wanted you, Judith said softly. Predictive intelligence is the ultimate strategic advantage, for markets, for politics, for conflict. Outside, they could hear Donovan speaking tersely into his phone, coordinating verification of the twins' insights on the cold case. The family knew their window for private conversation was limited. How long have you known you could do this? Rebecca asked. We had glimpses as children, Emma replied. Remember our twin dreams that sometimes came true, but the ability strengthened during adolescence. By 16, we could reliably map short-term probabilities. By 25, our range extended to months, occasionally years for major events. We kept it from Judith because we feared how others might exploit it, Ethan continued. We've used it carefully, anonymously warning of potential disasters when we could, but mostly focusing on staying ahead of those hunting us. Is that how you knew it was safe to contact us now? Vivian asked. The twins nodded in unison. We've been mapping this convergence point for years, Emma explained, waiting for the moment when the Institute would be vulnerable enough, our abilities strong enough, and the probability of success high enough. And that moment is now. Daniel seemed skeptical but willing to believe. A 2-week window, Ethan confirmed. Starting yesterday, the probabilities show multiple pathways to permanently neutralizing the Institute's threat, but they all require your help, all of you. Before they could elaborate, Donovan re-entered the cabin, his expression transformed. Jeffries was exactly where you said he'd be, he announced without preamble. Springfield PD just picked him up. The storage unit contained trophies from all 4 victims, plus 2 others we didn't know about. How the hell did you see that? Emma and Ethan exchanged glances, silently debating how much to reveal. The same way we've stayed ahead of the Novus Institute, Emma finally said. We process information differently. Donovan sat heavily at the table. I've made some calls to people I trust implicitly, cryptic inquiries about research foundations with unusual government connections. 2 separate sources told me to drop it immediately. A third asked to meet in person, off the record. These are people who don't scare easily. They know about Novus, Judith confirmed. The Institute's tentacles reach deep into intelligence and law enforcement communities, not controlling them entirely, but with enough strategic placement to protect their interests. If what you're saying is true, Donovan said slowly, this goes beyond a kidnapping case. This is about unauthorized human experimentation, child abduction on an organized scale, corruption of government agencies, and the weaponization of cognitive abilities, Emma added. The children they've successfully programmed are placed in key positions: intelligence analysis, financial markets, research laboratories. Their abilities, controlled by the Institute, provide their clients with advantages no conventional methods could match. Clients? Donovan asked. Private military contractors, investment firms, foreign intelligence services, whoever can pay, Ethan explained. The Institute itself is ideologically neutral. They sell strategic advantage to the highest bidder. Donovan checked his watch, made a decision. I need to meet my contact, the one willing to talk. I'll be back before dawn. In the meantime, stay here, stay together. My team has secured the perimeter. After he departed, the family continued piecing together 2 decades of separate lives. Rebecca and Daniel shared stories of the years without their children, the frantic searching, the slow acceptance of loss, the dissolution of their marriage under the weight of grief. The twins described their nomadic existence with Judith, always moving, always watching, always using their abilities to stay one step ahead of pursuers. There's something I don't understand, Vivian said during a lull in conversation. If you can see probable futures, why contact us at all? Why not just continue staying hidden? Emma and Ethan exchanged another meaningful glance. Because every future probability beyond the next 5 years showed the Institute finding us eventually, Emma explained. Their resources are too vast, their reach too extensive. The only paths to long-term safety require dismantling them completely, and that requires a critical mass of exposed information, Ethan continued. Evidence in too many hands to be contained. Testimonies from multiple sources. Public awareness that creates accountability. You're using yourselves as bait, Rebecca realized with horror, drawing attention to bring them into the open. It's calculated risk, Emma acknowledged. The highest probability pathway to permanent freedom, but it requires coordinated action from all of us. Throughout the night, they developed their strategy. The twins had spent years gathering evidence, financial transactions linking the institute to clients, medical records of acquired children, surveillance logs, internal communications. Judith had names of operatives, locations of facilities, identification protocols for potential acquisitions. What they needed from their family and Donovan were legitimate channels to release this information simultaneously to multiple oversight bodies, news organizations, and international human rights groups. A coordinated disclosure too widespread to be silenced. Dawn was breaking when Donovan returned, his face grim. My contact confirmed much of what you've told me. The Novus Institute exists, operating under multiple front organizations. They do indeed identify and acquire children with unusual cognitive patterns, and they are protected at very high levels. Did your contact know about the twins specifically? Judith asked. Not by name, but they referenced a high-priority acquisition that failed 20 years ago. Twins who were eliminated in a boating accident, according to official records, but who some in the organization believe escaped. They created a cover story to explain our failure to recover the bodies, Emma realized. Easier than admitting they lost us. Donovan placed a flash drive on the table. Names, contacts in 3 different federal agencies who aren't compromised. Secure protocols for submitting evidence. My contact is risking everything providing this. And you? Daniel asked. What's your position now? I believe them, Donovan said simply. The cold case confirmation would be impossible without some kind of extraordinary ability. The verification of the Institute's existence comes from someone I trust with my life. And frankly, the twins don't present as victims of 20 years of brainwashing. They're articulate, rational, and their story has internal consistency. The cabin became the center of intense activity. Using secure methods provided by Donovan's contact, they began preparing information packets, documentation of the Institute's activities, evidence of their child acquisition program, financial trails linking them to clients, testimony from the twins and Judith. Each packet was tailored to specific recipients, congressional oversight committees, international human rights organizations, trusted journalists, law enforcement agencies. But as they worked, Emma and Ethan grew increasingly tense, communicating in their wordless way with increasing frequency. What is it? Rebecca finally asked, maternal instinct detecting their distress. The probabilities are shifting, Emma said quietly. Something's changed. The safe window is collapsing. Ethan closed his eyes in concentration. They know we've surfaced. Someone in Donovan's chain reported his inquiries. Institute resources are being redirected to find us. How much time do we have? Donovan demanded. Hours, not days, Ethan replied. We need to accelerate the timeline. Get the information out immediately, even if it's not perfectly packaged. They worked with renewed urgency, finalizing the most critical evidence packages first. Donovan arranged secure transmission through his untainted contacts. The twins performed their mysterious shared cognition repeatedly, checking probability paths, redirecting efforts based on shifting patterns only they could perceive. By mid-afternoon, the first wave of disclosures had been sent. Within an hour, Donovan received confirmation that the information was being reviewed by trusted individuals in 3 separate agencies. The gears of exposure had begun turning. What now? Daniel asked as they took a moment to rest. Now we move, Emma said firmly. The highest probability of safety is no longer in this location. We need to split up temporarily. Different destinations, different evidence packages, converging again when the initial disclosure creates sufficient public awareness for protection. The plan was quickly formulated. Rebecca and Emma would travel to Washington, D.C. with one set of evidence, meeting directly with a senator on the Intelligence Oversight Committee. Daniel and Ethan would go to New York to connect with a renowned investigative journalist. Vivian and Judith would head to Geneva with documentation for international human rights organizations. Donovan would remain the official law enforcement liaison, coordinating with trusted colleagues as the investigation went public. "We'll reconvene in 10 days," Emma instructed, consulting the probability patterns only she and her brother could perceive. By then, the Institute will be facing too many fronts to effectively silence all of them. As they prepared to depart, Rebecca pulled her children into a fierce embrace. "I just found you again," she whispered. "I can't bear to be separated, even temporarily." "It's not forever this time, Mom," Ethan assured her. "Just a strategic division to ensure the information can't be contained. And I'll be with Emma," Rebecca acknowledged, "while Daniel has time with you." The twins shared a final silent communication. Then Emma turned to Agent Donovan. "There's something else you should know. Within the next 48 hours, you'll be approached by someone claiming to represent government interests. They'll offer immunity, promotion, even threatening your family if necessary. Whatever they say, however they frame it, they're working for the Institute." Donovan nodded grimly. "I figured as much. I've made arrangements for my family's protection." As they departed in separate vehicles, taking different routes to their designated locations, the war against the shadowy Novus Institute moved from decades of silent preparation to active engagement. The twins, having spent 20 years as fugitives, were finally taking the offensive against those who had stolen their childhood. For Rebecca and Daniel, the emotions were complex. Joy at reunion mixed with fear of fresh separation. Pride in the remarkable adults their children had become tempered by grief for the years lost. But beneath it all lay a ferocious determination. They had failed to protect their children once. They would not fail again. The Institute had taken 2 children and created formidable adversaries instead. Now those adversaries were coming for them, armed with truth as their weapon and the future itself as their map.